Hi, this is Glenn. Um, I'd like to talk about the future of education with the problem of SARS CoV-2. As a parent and former educator, I feel that the concerns about the next school year are well founded. What happened this year due to the COVID-19 lockdowns, shutdowns, and quarantines was largely unprecedented in the lives of most people. With very little time to react, schools were shut down, and administrators and educators had to come up with a solution, if possible. When this happened in March, I realized that it was unlikely that school would resume in its normal form before the end of the school year, and so I warned my kids right away to prevent them being shocked. They were not happy about this news, but it indeed softened the blow when a month later, Governor DeWine announced that the return to school was again delayed, and later still, that it was not going to resume in person to finish up the school year. Prior to entry into local schools last year, my kids were in online programs with Ohio Virtual Academy. I was very busy, so I couldn't help them, and they fell behind and were miserable. For my younger kid, the program required my regular involvement as an on-hand tutor, which was not possible due to existing demands on my time that required most of my time each day. For both, there were some shortcomings in the program. The program was clearly designed with a certain subset of students in mind, and the online interface was too complicated, among other problems. The complicated things were really unnecessary, so I moved them to a regular school. My kids are both smart, but their prior schooling didn't develop in them the traits necessary for online learning without routine supervision and intervention, and I had emergencies to deal with that took up way too much time to help them. In addition, neither of them felt comfortable asking their teachers for help through the online system. Additionally, the letters from principals stating that kids' grades wouldn't be affected, as well intentioned as they may have been, caused some kids to slack off because their pre-lockdown grades would not drop, but could have increased. This certainly took some of the urgency of studying away from my children, since they received this news too. Something I would have told the principals not to tell the kids, and to warn the parents not to tell them either. During the ensuing struggles of online learning, several of my kids' teachers didn't respond to my emails asking for assistance. This was frustrating and irresponsible, especially in light of the fact that letters from the schools assured us that teachers would regularly be in contact with us and respond to our needs. Some of the responses I got tried to minimize my concerns over my kids' challenges as the exception rather than the norm. In all honesty, I felt dismissed and my kids maligned or marginalized. I had to press for action and finally got some good responses, but the follow-through from teachers and my kids, who still didn't feel comfortable emailing their teachers for help, was lackluster. In the end, one of my kids finished their schoolwork only after being threatened with loss of all video games for the summer, while the other, who apparently never responded to those teachers who offered support, procrastinated so much that work in some subjects was incomplete by the last day. Our school district offered help with computers and internet access, which, as we all know, is not something that many school districts and many countries could do. So many places simply ended school for the duration. Indeed, it also gave food to each household that needed it, which was wonderful for many families. At first, a kind of pseudo-schooling was provided online, and then it was improved somewhat, but frankly, it still really missed the mark. I realized that educators were put on the spot to develop something that takes far more time, knowledge, and experience than they had available to them, not to mention that a crack team of programmers, designers, and developers would be required to work alongside the educational team to quickly craft a high-quality online experience, which was obviously not possible. So let's face the facts. First, remote learning doesn't suit every student. Not all kids thrive in a remote environment if they don't, for example, have a great deal of self-motivation and the desire to learn. Given that public schools and even many private ones are not noted for fostering such qualities, as well as creativity, a love of learning, grit, and more, the switch was doomed to be problematic. My kids, for all their intelligence, struggled. I cajoled, wheedled, and threatened with consequences, such as losing devices and screen time, and offered my kids my help when I was home. Even still, the results were subpar for my A children. Better solutions for remote learning are needed. Yet, given that there are existing online programs with solid track records, perhaps a better solution could have been implemented before the school year ended. Supposedly, Rhode Island is one of the leaders in the area of online learning in the U.S., to the point that snow days will now be dealt with as online learning days. I am not able to say with certainty, however, whether or not the existing alternatives would have been feasible, ready, and able to handle the influx of that many students, or even financially possible. Migrating the student population of a country into high-quality online programs would not, from a technical standpoint, be possible unless the company or companies involved had already substantially upgraded their servers, which isn't something that can be done quickly. It requires both that the company providing them with server space have servers of sufficient size and power to handle tens of millions of users at a time, and that their own IT team be ready and able to make any changes necessary within the software, which might be anywhere from minimal to requiring a lot of work, depending on their existing design, features, and database. What about the future? Well, what about the truth about people? Ready or not, a fundamental truth that any good educator knows is that students are not uniform in skills and intellectual strengths, nor do many educational systems actually equip students with the skills and characteristics necessary to thrive in the online environment of both increased responsibility and independence, coupled with decreased interaction with teachers, social intercourse, physical activity, interactive activities like labs, and other things that are critical for any child who benefits from learning by doing. In the educational world, they are called tactile and kinesthetic learners, and almost everyone can learn this way, even if their sight and or hearing are very important to their learning. The parent's burden. Parents also have a much larger burden because they must give their time in inverse proportion to the age of their kids and depending on their kids' abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. Some parents simply do not have that much time to give, while others lack the skills, knowledge, or even intelligence to be of real assistance to their children. Some will damage their kids using well-intentioned mollycoddling, for example, giving kids the answer at every request, doing difficult work for them out of pity, taking away all the challenges of learning, which undercuts the kid's ability to stand on his or her feet, and so on. There are even parents who will discourage their kids from studying because, after all, what use is an education if you're just going to end up working at a fast food restaurant, become a drug dealer, or get killed before you reach adulthood? On top of that, efforts to mitigate the problems of social isolation and physical activities can backfire if that means parents have to provide transportation at times when it will interfere with the parents' ability to earn money, assuming the parents even have a vehicle. Worse yet, during the lockdowns, parents who were still able to work had to contend with the fact that they had children under the age of 12 at home. Daycare centers were shut down, and they couldn't get babysitting help. I was fortunate as an essential worker in that my elder child is over 12. When my kids were in OHVA, I didn't have a vehicle, so it was very hard to go to such events, which were often fairly far from our homes in the suburbs. Online learning has weak spots. There are, in other words, gaping holes in online education. Yes, some kids do just great online and will go on to be successful, and yes, going to a physical school does not guarantee success in life. But this is because physical school systems are usually not designed to help children achieve their full potential, and in many cases children are left behind despite Bush's well-intentioned but stupid No Child Left Behind. However, online learning also is often not designed to bring out the best in all students because it employs much of the same methodologies that physical teaching uses, without some of the things that can be done in person. Ironically, teaching online is so lecture-oriented that it mimics some of the conditions of physical schools. Because of the flaws, online learning is not for every child, and there are many homes where kids don't have access to a computer and the internet, thus causing some districts to shut down learning entirely because they could not afford to resolve this issue. In addition, all the kids who were relying on school for the only good meal they got each weekday suddenly found themselves without even that, and the ones from abusive homes and communities found themselves without a school as an escape from the abuse. Wouldn't it have been nice if the Gates Foundation and others could have stepped in and made sure all kids were taken care of? Sadly, the strain of being at home with their kids all the time pushed many parents to increase their consumption of alcohol. Somehow, liquor stores were considered essential and allowed to keep selling, and other substances, with reports of increases in mental health problems, addiction, abuse, suicide, and divorce resulting, not to mention the financial struggles and increase in homelessness. Most virtual and physical schools, for example, rely on the factory line style, where everyone is grouped based on age and everyone is expected to progress at the same speed. Lessons focus heavily on seeing and hearing, with the teacher being the authority figure that disseminates and the students being expected to soak up all the information. Kids who cannot do so are held back a year or forced to take remedial classes, school during summer, or get tutoring. Even with internet access, however, there are still other issues. For example, you can claim, well, it worked for me, so it's fine. I went to school, a physical school. It was a college prep school, for junior and senior high school, and I did great. I get B average. So I could say, hey, just fine. But here's the truth. This is false logic based on only your own personal experience, whether remote or physical. We are not all the same. Continuing to use this centuries-old system ignores the following. We don't all develop physically or emotionally at the same rate of speed or at the same age, although there is a specific range of months or years when a major developmental stage occurs for most of us. Lecturing has the lowest rate of retention of information for most learners, but it is the most common form of teaching. Each person relies more heavily on one or more of their senses, which includes visual, auditory, gustatory, olfactory, tactile, kinesthetic, proprioception, equilibrioception, and many more. We are not all born with the same personality types, but what happens to us can force learned shifts in personality. For example, an extrovert can become an introvert if there is too much negativity. Some can become psychopaths because of severe and excessive abuse. Personality is also complicated by inherited neurological and psychological conditions, such as cheerfulness, paranoia, loquaciousness, shyness, fearlessness, schizophrenia, loyalty, and including neuroses and psychoses. We don't all have the same set of tools. A minority of people are born to excel in just about anything, but the rest of us are born with a mixed bag of strengths and weaknesses. And there's another minority that is born with virtually only weaknesses. This is now often referred to as multiple intelligences, which includes psychomotor, which are physical skills, affective and intellectual skills. Emotional intelligences is often used to refer to the effective range of skills, but it really means emotional and social skills, and although you can improve these things, it does take time. Some, if not all, skills in each of the three spheres are very difficult to improve after a certain point because of inborn limits within each individual. For myself, I can study advanced mathematics, and with routine, diligent study of it, I can achieve high scores, but I forget most of it very rapidly and cannot learn it if I'm lazy. I've had students who are not good at learning languages or even using their native tongue well. We also place psychological limitations on ourselves because of what others tell us and what we decide is true for ourselves. All of these and other considerations make the lockstep age-based educational system weak and a disservice to many students. This is why you'll see a portion of students are bored to tears in any given subject, and another group are struggling to get passing grades. Learning should be geared to the individual, not the norm. In other words, students should be able to work at their own pace and with sufficient help, with teachers facilitating instead of being the sole focus of learning while talking their students into a state of somnambulant boredom. Reality hit the fan in even larger gobs with the SARS CoV-2 lockdowns. All the weaknesses of our educational system are coming to the fore and being exacerbated by remote learning for a whole host of kids who cannot thrive in that environment, and some who need the mitigating impact of school on their highly dysfunctional home and community lives. This is not really the fault of educators themselves. After all, they don't make the policy decisions for education, so the blame falls squarely on the politicians who make decisions they're not qualified to make, plus the influence of special interest groups and businesses and others. So what's next? I agree with the idea that families should have the right to expect their kids will be back in school come autumn, or at the very least, have a full-fledged online program that takes into account not just the academic expectations, but also the physical and psychological needs of kids. Let's not forget, of course, that some kids' only sanctuary from abuse, neglect, poor nutrition, etc. is at school, while others are safe at home and abused at school by bullying. If every school district cannot put forward a comprehensive plan for the coming school year that addresses the needs of all families, many families will be in trouble. Any remote learning program should more than adequately address these and many other issues, as well as providing for direct human interaction that will ultimately prove critical to the futures of some children who are at risk of a life of crime and or addiction without proper intervention. My kids don't want more online learning, and there is no pressing reason they cannot attend school. They're not in a high-risk group. Unless there are major improvements in online learning, which I don't expect to see as long as the U.S. continues to disrupt the educational system and embrace failures like No Child Left Behind and Common Core, I don't want them learning online. As a single dad with minimal support from others and time to help my kids because of my career as a USPS employee, I feel it is critical that a better solution be arrived at, and soon. Business referendum is something I think that needs to be addressed. Businesses are going to have to change their models to accommodate the unfortunate new normal that politicians and the media are pressing on us. Businesses that run on pure economics may be successful in that regard, but they create a disaster when it comes to the society, the environment, families, and psychological well-being. America is very dysfunctional in some ways, and the cutthroat methods of the economic business model are a major source of problems. So, out with the old, in with the new. In addition, educators should not stick to the standard one-size-fits-all method, and instead should focus on individual progress, allowing each student to move forward in each subject at their own speed. I realize that this may sound radical, but there are educational systems that have been doing this for at least 100 years, and since we're not all designed to work at the same speed on each subject, it makes a lot more sense. If you want to use the standard system, use it on robots, not people. Ultimately, a new system must be implemented, one that is holistic and actually geared at helping most, if not all, students achieve their full potential, as well as developing other aspects of life that are lacking in the U.S., such as civic responsibility, unity and diversity, tolerance, creativity, strong study skills, memorization tricks like the Memory Masters, and grit, while providing meaningful information in grade reports instead of the old-school report cards that are almost useless, and a broad range of subjects using superior techniques and methodologies. I would recommend integrated curriculums and self-paced learning, as well as a wide range of other things to develop real-world skills. Perhaps I'll delve into this more in more detail in the future. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen.